Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Now, to ensure that this apparent freedom of the reader from domination by the author comes into being, what we need for hypertext digital writing systems are certain supporting codes or programming, which occurs as the backbone of electronic literature. Now, in the early days of the internet, we see a lot of efforts by various institutions to develop adequate support systems. The point about this is very similar to what we saw in the early days of the manuscript era, where there would be specialized scribes. So, poets would take help of poets or scholars would take help of scribes in order to get their creations, literary creations written. And this got more systematized in the print process, though it became almost invisibilized. It looked like it is some kind of a baking kiln, the printing press, where the author submitted a manuscript, would submit a manuscript, and that would be printed out in and the task, this highly technical task of actually printing the manuscript would be taken up by a specialized system, right, specialized institution, which is that of the press or the publisher. However, in the case of electronic media, what we see is that the author writes on directly, creates directly on the system, because the way the network, the digital platform is structured, will also structure the literary work. And therefore, this back end actually, in the case of the digital literary universe, needs to come in before the text is actually created. These supporting systems need to come into operation, need to be present before the creativity actually begins. In fact, it is very often that the way the back end, the codes, the programs, the platforms are structured determines the way the literary creativity also gets structured, right. And therefore, what various organizations did undertake is our efforts to actually make multiple platforms available according to the demands of the kind of creative use writers, artists would like to put the newfound hypertextual medium, this all right. So, some of these supporting systems we are going to look at some of these in some with some proximity. They are being discussed here. So, the guide and the hypercard system, what tries to do is randomize the linking of text segments. That is, these linkages are not fixed. They are randomly associated as the text is encountered by a reader, very much like the shuffling of cards. Okay. In a normal web page, what you do, you would find is that the association between a particular hyperlinked text and another another text is the linkages between the two texts, the nodes are fixed, right. So, when you click on a particular link, a particular text will open up, but in this particular case in a system, that linking becomes randomized. So, this was one of the systems was Intermedia by Brown University. The other is Story Space. What Story Space does is, as we have seen, one of the features of the digital media is that because everything at the back end is code, so it becomes much easier to actually place various kinds of media together with text. So, you can put maps, you can put images or even videos alongside the text, and Story Space is that kind of a platform, an online platform which allows one to do that. Another important characteristic is that printed texts can be read in hyperspace, right. So, if there is a book, that book either in e-book format or even in HTML format or even in PDF format, multiple formats. In fact, many a times choices are given. So, when you try to look at a text, for example, you go to Project Gutenberg and you want to look at a text which is outside the purview of copyright, and Project Gutenberg gives you a choice. How do you want to read this text? Do you want to read it as a PDF? Do you want to read it as a HTML? Or download it as an e-book? In fact, if you go to a website like LibriVox, there you can also get audiobooks, audio formats for many of these print texts. So, the printed text, once they are available, they can be transformed into various other formats to be sort of read and encountered within the hyperspace universe. But the same cannot be said of the hypertext universe, right. Hypertext does not translate into print, or in fact, very complex hypertext will not be cannot be translated into print. Why is that? That is because the multilinearity, the multivocality of the hypertext can have the probability of actually enclosing within its own larger scheme a linear text, and printed texts are linear, right. So, it is possible to enclose a printed text in whatever format it is within a larger hypertext network. However, the network is very difficult to actually put forward within a within the printed format, right, because print by its very nature has a linear structure. That is when we are talking about the codex, right, principally, or we are talking about the line, the sentence, and text organized hierarchically into paragraphs and chapters within that codex in such a situation. But look at this, we just talked about this randomized linking of various text segments as like the shuffling of cards. Now, it is possible. So, obviously, cards are do not have a linearity, they can be, when you put cards around, they can be organized in any particular fashion. When someone is doling out cards, they do not do it in any particular order, though they have to be put in that order, and that is the entire game of the cards, to put something that inherently do not have a link, to link them, to create new linkages between them. That is the idea. So, even cards are printed, right. So in this kind of a situation, one can say that if a hypertext document is there, one can probably print it in a diagrammatic fashion, showing the interlinkages between that. So that's what we call a sitemap. Many sites would offer you a sitemap to give you a diagram of the various linkages between different pages, and what are the how they are how that entire network within that particular web page is linked. A sitemap becomes an easier sort of way to navigate a kind of a fixed framework within which to navigate a particular website, which otherwise belies a fixed print kind of universe. But of course, the diagram is not linear, right. So, it is a very different kind, and you can just have one shot of the diagram. It has to be a single object, it cannot be kind of a linked object as a codex which is linked in a particular way, right. So conceptually the hyperspace is different from print, as we know. Now, one of the concerns of the supporting systems of electronic literature, digital within the digital ecosphere, is that the change in technology. Now, what happens typically, as you know, as we go along the electronic age, we find we constantly need to upgrade both our hardware and our softwares, and hardwares become obsolete as we go along. The exponential pace at which these get to be replaced and get to be upgraded is just mind-boggling. What is the turnaround of a phone? How long does a phone take to get obsoleted? Is it 6 months? Is it 3 months? Depends on how absolutely up to date you want to remain, right. So this is the problem for hypertext creativity. In fact, the very early literatures would not be readable anymore, because people would not have those machines installed, right. Those softwares, the softwares will not be operating anymore. So the works may not remain accessible in this new environment. So and the work has to be read. The work of the artist who actually works in the hyperspace universe actually must be read in that. So what you just saw is the fun of the hypertext universe, where even after publication one can make corrections to the text that one has. But to return to our point, is that this is a major challenge. Video games, which I have pointed out that video games do work on narratives, and therefore have a literary angle to it, very much like the film script. Now, the play script is the back end, right, the literary back end of the performance. If the film script is a literary back end of the movie, then the overall narrative structure of a video game is the literary back end of a particular video game, right, environment. Now, video games do go obsolete. They have to be upgraded, and those narratives are left behind. They cannot be accessed, which is very different from the manuscript or the print universe. Yes, the only ways in which a manuscript could get obsoleted, really not manuscripts are altogether very, very recent, but some of these clay tablets or other or even the Rosetta Stone or the seals from the Mohenjo-daro, they get obsoleted simply because nobody knows that language anymore. So you cannot access it, human beings cannot access it, or if I do not know a particular language, I cannot read a particular printed book. So that is the only sort of barrier that could be there in accessing print. Otherwise, it's unless the physical copy has been destroyed through various reasons of time and longevity, these works continue to remain accessible. But in the electronic universe, texts which are produced get obsoletated because that software on which it has been created does not exist anymore, does not work anymore. So, hyperfiction, the way it occurs is there are no fixed centers. We do not know. So, it's up to the reader where they begin and where they end. There are no edges, no boundaries, and becomes a kind of an exitless maze. You can keep moving around and round within a particular text, and so therefore, there is no immediate beginning, middle and end. The beginning, middle and end is something that is defined according to the particular user's experience, and there are these different challenges because of the navigational procedures. So, the questions that are there could be that how do you move around without getting lost? How do you actually go about engaging and understanding the text? Because because there is no clear sense of a beginning, middle and end. Remember, we are still brought up, our schools still operate on printed texts. So, we are used to this idea of the beginning of a book and the end of a book, and with texts where there are no exits may actually exhaust the reader. That is one viewpoint. The other viewpoint may be that it draws the reader in and sort of intoxicates the reader. How many kids have you seen play the same video games again and again without fail, and they do not want to leave it. So it could be intoxicating as well. It could be addictive, right? So, and the crucial question, a very important question: how does one judge, analyze, or write about a work that never reads the same way twice? Different people have different viewpoints. So, various people will have various takes on a certain work. Interesting viewpoint by Coover. If you relate it to traditional printed texts, linear texts, well, two people may watch the same movie and have different viewpoints, but the point is that there they may refer to this a same text and point out, okay, I understand what your experience is, but what your reaction to this particular film is. But if I refer to this specific episode, this particular specific scene or specific sequence, then maybe you would change your mind and you would agree to my point of view. That is how a conversation on a film, a movie goes, and we can agree to disagree between ourselves as to what a particular work, how a particular work can be analyzed, or what would be a fit reaction or reception to a particular piece of work. At least the text remains fixed. But this viewpoint within the of the digital media is very similar to the manuscript universe, where we did talk about the fact that there would be different manuscripts. This, though they may have the same title and purportedly by the same writer, talking about this the same narrative, but the exact sequence, the exact representation, the exact portrayal might be very different within each of the things, each of the manuscripts, and different scholars would be referring to different manuscripts, and therefore it was very difficult to come. It would have been even very difficult to even conceptualize coming into any kind of agreement on what the text is. The fixity of the text would not be there. And so what we see here is that electronic texts present a challenge before analysis and criticism, in the same way in which analysis and criticism was difficult within the early manuscript universe, when manuscripts would be very few and far between, except within, as we said, except within specific circles of scholars who are referring to a specific manuscript, right, and that leads to a certain kind of a bubble in which a particular community believes in a truth, and there are multiple truths which fail to interact with each other and therefore fail to produce the universal. Whereas in the manuscript universe, this concept of a universal analysis or a world view would not have existed, because that historically had not pre-existed at that point of time. In the case of the digital universe, of course, it becomes a bit of a challenge, because we are used to these universal overarching claims, larger meta narratives, and those getting challenged because of the new ways in which texts have started behaving within the electronic universe becomes a major challenge, because there is of course always that first generation learner who have never actually encountered the printed text before, and they would not understand what the fuss is all about, right. We will be discussing this aspect of the digital media, particularly the kind of fake news atmosphere that exists within the social media in greater detail in another lecture. However, the point to be noted is that this becomes a very important question in the sphere of the literary world of the digital media, right. Now, so now question is whether one can privilege one kind of reading over the another. That is again a matter of open debate, and this is what Coover has to say about this entire issue. He says reading hyperfiction and reading traditional printed fiction may be the difference between sailing the islands and standing on the dock and watching the sea. One is not necessarily better than the other one. So, whether you are so this is what he is referring here is this idea of the distant reading versus the close reading. Now, either you are moving from place to place, or you have the large overview. The one cannot privilege one over the other. Because we have been used to one kind of reading, the other forms of reading, other forms of operating are negative. There is no reason to privilege one over the other. Now, the point is that because within the digital text, the task of the navigation is taken up by the reader, right. Also, it is taken up by the writer who lays out the text within its various linkages, but it is also the task of the navigating is upon the reader as well, and therefore, there is greater awareness among the readers of the shape of the narrative, whereas in the printed text the shape is given by the form, right. I mean, it is given by the form of the book, which is a linear form, and therefore, and it is only the writer who chooses to play around with that form. The reader, once the book has been printed, once it has been put into a particular shape, the reader does not any longer retain a choice of it, right. So this focus on the structure is there is as much focus on the content as much and on the structure is this the focus on the structure is far greater in the within the electronic literature, and this structure is almost mostly hidden in printed stories. It is only in critical practices that we see that the structures of printed texts are discussed, are unpacked, right. So, what are the various strategies, the strategies of multivocalism that of the usage of graphic elements, various kinds of elements to bring in. Now, those of you who have studied Bertolt Brecht, again we will refer to it. The point is, one of the ways in which Brecht brings in multivocalism and a kind of a critical viewpoint is by by bringing in different media, projections and placards and songs. That is of course the kind of mechanism that exists within the electronic media. The fact that there are various kinds of elements which are used, and within the kind of marked up atmosphere, we have seen how within print the use of paragraph spacing and drop caps and various headings and subtitles and margins are kind of ways of indicating various nodes of the text. So, here within the web page, font changes could be one of the ways in which to indicate various voices, various plot elements, sometimes different colors of fonts, backgrounds and other kinds of material could be used. And one could of course use the number of various elements that could be included within the hypertext within a electronically produced text could be much larger. Various kinds of formats could actually be incorporated, and it will be left to the reader as to what kind of documents that the reader would like to refer to.